welcome back to another episode of Is Fitz Happy? I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
We're discussing Chapter 3 of Fool's Errand, Partings. And this is the chapter where Fitz confronts Starling, as we hinted at last time.
Yes. Last time we left off, and Hap had spilled the beans that Starling has a husband, and Fitz was pretty upset by that, but made sure that Hap knew that he wasn't upset with him, and their relationship was fixed, but now he is struggling with the next choices. What happens now?
In this chapter, we also get a lot about the present day political climate regarding wit in the Old Blood and the feelings of how that runs in the Six Duchies. And so to start off that chapter, we do have an epigraph in this one taking as an excerpt from Sarcogen's Diseases and Afflictions, whatever that is, and it's talking about the wit as if it is an affliction that is contagious.
Yes, it is a dirty magic, specifically is how it's labeled.
Most often afflicting the children of an unclean household. There are other sources than just having congress with beasts. There are other sources of the magic. For example, pretty much anything if you're nearby. He's listing off.
Yeah, like don't let your child sleep near animals, and
it can afflict generations.
Yes, but it doesn't necessarily have to be generational. Sometimes, every once in a while, even good blood will have one pop up, and in that case, you need to punish the servants because clearly one of them has let something happen to your beloved child.
Yep.
That's not. I don't know. It's really interesting to see it talked about in this way.
When this happens, when a child has the wit from a good family, the parents must harden their hearts and do what must be done for the sake of all the family's children. So yeah, it's basically saying eradicate it.
Yeah. It really is an interesting excerpt to take, especially book. What is this? 7?
6, 7. You're right.
Yes.
7.
Book 7. I was going to say no. Book 7 of a series, especially when we had 3 books of the main character who we're with now, who is witted, and we know that it's not a bad thing. But I guess we haven't really talked about the origin at all. Like nobody has discussed how it happens. We definitely saw Burek worried about having young animals around young Fitz, but that didn't seem to be because that's going to make him witted. It just was because it's dangerous to have too young of wit and wit potential partners near each other.
Right. And then there's also, in the first trilogy, we got wit is bad from the lens of Regal, who we knew was a bad person and the villain in the story. So we didn't know how deeply that ran and whether that source was him and just for people different.
Right.
And we get to explore a little bit more of the centuries of history that Old Blood has in the Six Duchies.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic because this is a universe where magic does exist and is known to exist. It's like hedge witches are a thing. They have people who scry, and that's not that weird. And yet wit magic is seen as this dirty affliction that is given to people or whatever they catch.
Piebald Prince really messed it up for everyone, I guess.
Truly.
Fitz rouses himself shortly before dawn. Hap is drowsing there, and he heads off towards the cottage once again. He was glad that Hap's telling Fitz about Starling had put him at peace with himself, and Fitz's own route to peace would be a rockier path. He's kind of dreading this confrontation that he must have.
He also notes that Hap is not a boy for secrets, which I find really intriguing to think about, that Hap is this character who is really earnest and honest and just doesn't like keeping things from people, which is funny because later he does sort of keep a lot from Fitz.
Right. Yeah. But this kind of goes hand in hand with what we were talking about last episode, where Fitz didn't raise Hap with any kind of worldly knowledge at all.
Right. Yeah.
So it kind of makes sense that he would raise him exactly the opposite of how Fitz was raised himself. Watch over him, I told Night Eyes. I could feel the aching in the wolf's hips echoing the gnawing pain in my scarred back. Nights in the open were not gentle to either of us anymore. Yet I would have gladly lain down on the cold, damp earth rather than go back to my cottage and confront Starling. Sooner is usually better than later when it comes to facing unpleasantness, I told myself. And so he stops for eggs and gets back to the cottage and starts up breakfast.
Yeah, and notably, he talks about how he's walking like an old man, which is a good callback because last chapter, Starling said on cold mornings he walks like an old person.
Right.
And
yeah.
here he is noting that he is indeed walking like an old person after spending the night outside.
I take out my last loaf of bread, the cheese that Shade had brought, and tea herbs. Starling was never an early riser. I had plenty of time to think of what I would say and what I would not say. As I put my room to rights, mostly picking up her scattered belongings, my mind wandered back over the years we had shared. Over a decade it had been of knowing one another, of thinking I knew her, I corrected myself. Then I damned myself for a liar. I did know her. I picked her discarded cloak from the chair. Her scent was trapped in its good wool. A very fine quality, I told myself. Her husband provided her with the best. The worst part of this was what Starling had done did not surprise me. I was ashamed only of myself that I had not foreseen it. Then he says that for 6 years after the cleansing of Buck, he had moved alone through the world, making no contact with anyone who had ever known him at Buckkeep. Everything was dead to him in the past. He progressed as Tom Badgerlock, entered wholeheartedly into that new life, and he traveled with Night Eyes.
And it was just what he had always wanted. It was decisions being made by himself and his wolf only. Nobody else to tell him what to do or where to go or what was the right thing to do.
This is not to say that I didn't miss those I had loved at Buckkeep. I did, sometimes savagely. But in missing them, I also discovered my freedom from my past. A hungry man can long for a hot meal and gravy without disdaining the simple pleasures of bread and cheese. I put together a life for myself, and if it lacked much of what had been sweet in my old life, it also provided simple pleasures the old life had long denied me. I had been content.
I sort of want to talk about this because I'm wondering if you think he's telling the truth here.
I think so, as much as Fitz can be content at this point, with being partially forged and kind of denied that emotional growth that we've talked about over the podcast, and being able to truly feel, life's pleasures.
Sure.
He takes joy in what he can, and I think he was happy because in his mind that past was dead. He made that decision never to go back, which he didn't think was even a decision that he could make.
Right.
But he's like, that past is dead to me. Verity is gone. Six Duchies is saved. Molly and Byrrc are together. There's no reason for me to go back. So let me retire in peace. I'll get what enjoyment I can out of it. And I think him and Night Eyes traveling around was able to provide Fitz with some semblance of happiness.
Okay. And the other question I have is, do you think that he's being truthful that what he had with Starling truly was just a casual thing? It wasn't love in any type of way other than friendship,
He talks about it a little bit later as well, and kind of dwells on if he did love her, because in his youth he would have, he was such romantic. We've talked about that.
Yes.
And they've never floated that idea between one another ever.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yeah, I do love her as a friend, but that's kind of it. And he's not been introspective. Obviously, it's Fitz.
Yeah.
And sometimes he can be very introspective, usually to his own detriment, but he's not introspective exploring other relationships at this point in his life. And I think if he did try to think on it, he would kind of come to the same conclusions, even if he didn't know that she had a husband.
Okay.
That, we're companions. We love spending this time with one another, but we don't romantically love one another.
Okay.
So I feel like at this point he knows Starling,
Yeah, that's
and he
fair.
knows himself too, because Starling isn't his first choice either.
Right. Would you say then that you think that Fitz is capable of love? It's just there's lack of choice, and this is a friend he trusts, and so that's what's going on? Or he's not even capable because of the foraging and putting all that young love and of Molly away into a dragon?
He's definitely capable of love, but with newer relationships, I think. Like, he loves dutiful.
Well, I mean, sorry, I should specify romantic love, like being in love with someone. Is that possible for him to do at this point?
I think he feels, I don't know, it's really hard to say with the forging, because a lot of his feelings with love are tied up with Molly that he put away,
Mhm.
right? So a lot of that teenage growth and those feelings are gone, and he
Yeah.
doesn't have those building blocks anymore. So I don't know if he could truly love somebody, but he feels a lot more affection for Jenna later than he does for Starling, I think.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
So
So
there's degrees to it.
yeah, definitely. And I don't want to say that there's, something wrong with the way that he and Starling are. Definitely not. Just I'm just curious about the romantic love side of it, and if the lack thereof is stemming from that sort of partial forging, or if it's just more of a it wouldn't have happened no matter what, and they probably wouldn't have gotten together as much as they have if he weren't only accessible to Starling, or only able
Right.
to access Starling,
Yeah.
or her to him, I guess.
Well, he talks about his past still and how eventually one fogging morning, about a year after he had settled into the cottage near the ruins of Forge, the wolf and I returned from a hunt to find change waiting in ambush for us. There was a rider, a horse out front, and somebody in the hut, and Night Eyes and him are both sneaking up on him and be like, who would be here? Who's trying to steal from us? If it's just a traveler, why are they, rummaging around in my kitchen and things like this?
Exactly.
And he sets forward a little bit more and says, whoever it was, he seemed to be making himself at home. An instant later, I heard a voice lift in the refrain of an old song, and my heart turned over in me. Despite the years that had passed, I recognized Starling's voice. The howling bitch, Night Eyes confirmed for me. He'd caught her scent. As always, I winced wryly at how the wolf thought of the minstrel. Let me go first. Despite knowing who it was, I was still wary as I approached my own door. This was no accident. She'd tracked me down. Why? What did she want of me? Starling, I said as I opened the door. She spun to confront me, teapot in hand. Her eyes traveled me swiftly and then met my eyes, and Fitz! She exclaimed happily and lunged at me. She embraced me, and after a moment, I put my arms around her as well. So this is, she started visiting him just as he kind of describes her regular visits, just descending on him in a flurry and then being gone.
Yeah, it's really interesting too that she found him kind of really quickly, right? We have
A year after he settles down, yeah.
yeah, it's not that long, honestly.
Definitely Chade who found him.
Obviously, yeah. And it does make me wonder when the traveling tinker came through, because I feel like that's part of Chade's network, even if that specific one wasn't working for Chade. And I don't think he was like setting out to find Fitz. I think if Chade had feelers out and heard about this guy living in the woods alone with a wolf or a very large dog as a pet,
Right.
he would immediately know it was Fitz. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that the timing of that was before Starling came, or if Starling was sent out to look for him.
Yeah, I don't know.
But
I don't know.
yeah, either way, she found him. And the first time they meet, before they can talk about why she's there or what's going on, she takes him to bed.
Mm-hmm. Seizes his face between her hands and pulls me down to be kissed. Starling, I began. No, she said firmly. She glanced over my shoulder and then took both my hands to tug me toward the sleeping alcove off the main room. Lurched after her, drunken with surprise. Don't talk yet. And then Night Eyes shoulders the door open. For an instant, he just looked at us. Then he shook the moisture from his coat. It was Starling's turn to freeze. The wolf. I'd almost forgotten. You still have him? We are still together, of course. I don't mind, I suppose. She looked uncomfortable, but does he have to be here? Night Eyes gave another shake. He looked at Starling and away. The chill in the room was not just from the door standing open. The meat will be cold and stiff if I wait for you. They had brought a deer back. Then Fitz replies, Then don't wait, I suggested, stung. Jealousy or courtesy, I wondered, as Night Eyes shuts him out of his mind as well.
Right. So there is, again, like we talked about, the firming of boundaries where Night Eyes walks away from this and gives the boundary, and he himself is pulling away from Fitz's mind. So Fitz didn't even have to ask. There was no conversation. It just is sort of known.
Relationship matured a bit. And yeah.
And we know that he spent time with Black Ralph at some point before moving to the cabin and learned more about that. And I'm wondering if sort of the frosty attitude from Night Eyes stems at all from Fitz choosing to be with Starling when he refused to be with, I don't remember her name, but the girl with the hawk. Or, that's last trilogy as well, though, right?
What are you talking about, Celerity?
Is it Celerity?
I mean, she was one of the Duke's daughters.
No, the Old Blood.
Oh, Rolf and Holly had someone in the village.
Yes.
I don't remember, but she didn't care for Fitz either.
No.
So.
But I just wonder if it's sort of like that. Maybe also we know that Night Eyes loves Kettrikin.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's more of like, I can't believe you'd pick her over Kettrikin, but I don't know. Either way, Night Eyes gives him space.
Mm-hmm. That joining had happened between us in much the same way as night falls upon the land. Fitz says he made really no decision. It just kind of happened. Thinking back on it, I wondered if she had planned it that way. Probably not. Starling had taken that part of my life with no more thought than she would have given to picking a berry by the roadside. It was there, it was sweet, why not have it? We had become lovers with no declaration of love, as if our betting were inevitable. Did I love her even now, after all the years of her coming and going from my life? Questions of love and honor and duty. And he talks about here of the artifacts that Chade had brought back into his life, and then thinks about love and honor and duty, and says, I loved Molly. Did Molly love me? Did I love her more than I loved my king? Was she more important to me than my duty? As a youth, I had agonized over those questions, but with Starling I had never even asked them until now. Yet as ever, the answers were elusive. I loved her not as a person carefully chosen to share my life, but as a familiar part of my existence. To lose her would be like losing the hearth from the room. I had come to rely on her intermittent warmth. I knew that I had to tell her that I could not continue as before. And again, he dreads that.
Right. So again, we have this moment of what is the relationship between Fitz and Starling from Fitz's point of view. And interestingly, love isn't even something that has come to mind until right this moment, even though that used to be such a big part of his personality and who he was and what he truly believed in.
It's just part of his existence that she's there.
Yeah. And interestingly, as the last two chapters have shown, he doesn't typically think of Molly that often. And when he does, there's sort of a removal from it. I think this is the closest we've seen to sort of a emotional response to Molly. And it's just about Molly, not about Burrick and how Burrick's relationship is with Molly or Molly's relationship to Nettle. It's specifically about Molly, but the thing that prompts it is thinking about love and how important is love anyway. And then thinking, well, at one point it was, because that's all I thought about with Molly.
Mm-hmm.
But it still isn't I love her right now and I miss her and wish that things had been different. It's just sort of at one point in my life, I loved Molly and didn't know if that was enough.
Yeah, and these feelings and talking this way is such a stark contrast to the way the end of this trilogy feels, because he gets his memories back and then all of a sudden it's like an ache in his chest when he sees Molly, you know? It's like that super emotional overwriting again
Yes.
of Fitz just being a sappy teenage romantic.
Yes, and I feel like in a weird way, every time he talks about Molly now is very Wintro-esque, in that it's more of like a ponderance of what is the meaning of a word, and it's very scholastic and like school worthy. It's not feelings based necessarily. And I find that so interesting and such a fun thing to like pick up on as a rereader, and especially for this podcast, of these little tiny things that as you're going along, you probably sort of notice, but it's not forefront to your mind. And so then at the end of the book, when you find out, oh yeah, or you remember he's missing a ton of emotions and stuff, and that's definitely affected him, it's nice to have the little like notice the crumbs along the way, I guess.
Yeah. Starling rouses from the other room, and he does not turn around as he's pouring the tea over the leaves. Yet she did not come to me or touch me. After a pause, she spoke. So, Hap told you. Yes, I replied evenly. And you're determined to let it ruin everything between us. There seemed no answer to that. Anger surged into her voice. You've changed your name, but after all these years, you've not changed your ways. Tom Badgerlock is just as straight-laced a prude as Fitz Chivalry Farseer was. Don't, I warned her, not of her tone, but of that name. I won't, she assured me, but it was a knife sheathed. They've tried very hard to keep those secrets from Hap.
Yes.
Fitz has particularly, but then again, she can unveil that secret and say, yes, Fitz lives.
She's using it almost as a threat of, I know your identity and I can share that, which is very immature and frustrating. But I do also want to touch on that whole aspect of last chapter. We didn't really harp on it too much, but Fitz was really scared that the reason Hap was freaking out was because
he figured out his secret.
Yeah, he figured out that Tom Badgerlock is Fitz Chivalry.
Yeah.
And so I think here is just a really good reminder of that, of Hap doesn't know. He's never been told. There's no real reason for him to know, I guess. And he is a kid, and so I think it is nice of Fitz to keep that from him. But it is really icky, even all the more icky, I guess, to have a Starling come in and use that as sort of a weapon of, I know the secret and I can ruin that for you.
Yeah. And she's like, why do you begrudge me living two lives if you're doing the same thing? And Fitz is like, well, I'm not living two lives. At least I don't think of it that way. This is my life now. It's is in the past.
Right. And really interestingly, Starling's excuse for this whole thing is that her husband doesn't know, so there's no way he can care, because he doesn't know it's even happening. So who cares? He doesn't care. He doesn't know. And when Fitz says, it matters to me, I care, she then gets angry at Fitz saying he's the one who cares, and sort of says that he better be proud that he's raised another prude like himself.
You've raised another moralistic, judgmental prig like yourself. You inflicted your stiff standards on yet another young man.
And she's just getting more and more angry and being more and more rude. And then she sees all of her stuff on the hearth and gets angry and starts digging through it, and finally whips around and says, "What does it hurt?" she demanded. "Your husband, if he ever gets word of it," I said quietly. "Hap gave me to understand he's a noble of some kind. Gossip can do more damage to that kind of man than a knife. Consider his dignity, the dignity of his house. Don't make him some old fool taking a lively younger woman." "Old fool?" She looks perplexed. Hap told you he was old?" So now she's kind of
it's like, wait.
taking a break because, wait, hold on. No, he's not an old man.
Like, well, Hap said he was a grand man. Grand, yes, but scarcely old. Quite the opposite. He's 24, Fitz. A fine dancer and strong as a young bull. What did you think, that I'd pastured myself out to warm some elderly lord's bed? I had. I thought... She was suddenly almost defiant, as if I had belittled her. He's handsome, and he's charming, and he could have had his pick of any number of women. He chose me. And in my own way, I do truly love him. He makes me feel young and desirable and capable of real passion. What did I make you feel? I asked unwillingly, my voice low. I knew I was inviting more pain, but I couldn't stop myself. That puzzled her for a moment. Comfortable, she said at last, with no thought for my feelings. accepted and valued. She smiled suddenly, and her expression cut me. Generous, giving you what no one else would, and more, worldly and adventurous, like a bright songbird come to visit a wren. You were that, I conceded. But no more, Starling, never again.
So I just want to pause here. First of all, we have this sort of underlying current of Starling is thrown off from the argument because she can't believe Fitz would think that she would be with some old man.
Right. Which is kind of insulting from Fitz's side, you know.
Yeah.
It's minor in the midst of all of it, but like it is insulting a little bit.
It is a little insulting, but it is really funny that Fitz is like, she is taking care of how her words cut me, and throws out, well, he's an old man. And but there's also this sort of pride in her that she can get a great catch, and she does love him, but she also likes playing around, and who does it hurt? She doesn't care.
Yeah.
And I find it interesting because I have a sinking feeling that she would care if her husband was gallivanting with young women or older women, just other people in general behind her back. Maybe she wouldn't. Maybe she truly doesn't care. Maybe that's the life of a bard.
Well, we've talked about this before with her being barren and her traumatic past with the Raiders and everything like that. She views this as a way to gain control of her life and her sexuality again, right?
Yeah.
This is her own, it's her onus on the world. It's her choices. And it's not until she is pregnant and becomes pregnant that she's like, no, I'm shutting everything down. Like, we can't even be like that cordial to one another, Fitz, because we have to distance ourselves. Like, I'm totally doings.
Yeah.
So I really do think it's a lot of, you know, I'm never going to be a mother kind of feel to her character that she's kind of lashing out against as well. That's the way that it feels that Robin Hobb is writing her, because as soon as she can be a mother, everything kind of flips in her.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. I guess a fair read of this character. I don't know. It is really annoying in this instance, though, just to have her. It just feels like she's being so petty and mean for no reason. It feels like Fitz is the only adult in the room, and they're the same age. They're both 35.
I even think she's a little bit older, if I remember correctly.
I'm not really sure, but they're around the same age. So she's mid-30s talking about, who cares if I cheat? It's not that big of a deal. Like, she's 14. Like, it's like, who cares if they don't know? But also this going back to like, well, also, I actually love the guy, and so you don't know anything, and he's young and cute, so I'm going to hurt you there. And then to turn around and tell Fitz, well, you only made me comfortable. And then to keep going. Like, I think truly the first few things she says are her real feelings. I don't think all of it's fake by any means, but I think she's being extra choicey with her words to be mean by saying, I felt generous for giving you something no one else would. And that's the thing too, to me, that makes me frustrated with this, is that the whole time Starling is acting like she's God's gift to the earth. She's Saw's gift to the earth, if you will. And she walks...
Ida's gift.
And she walks through life blessing men with her presence, and she is just amazing for her gifts in song and bardhood and in what she can do in the bedroom. And it's, you know what, you should be grateful she even deigned to give you her presence. And it, like, that type of attitude is really annoying to me. So I extra don't love this sort of line. And it's worse because Fitz is trying to be calm, cool, and collected and just say, hey, I don't like finding this out. And you knew that I wouldn't like it, and you lied to both of us. And I don't like this anymore. And instead of sort of, you know, accepting like, yeah, okay, you don't have to like it, whatever, she's going scorched earth and just trying to hurt his feelings.
Right. Yeah, so he says, never again, Starling. I won't steal the crumbs from another man's plate. I have that much pride. And she responds, you can't afford to have that pride. Look around you. You have a dozen years on your own. What do you have? Cottage, handful of chickens. I bring the sweetness and the brightness for, a few days a year. That's it. I'm the only real person in your life. Crumbs from another man's table are better than starving. You need me. Hap, Night Eyes, I pointed out coldly. She dismissed them. An orphan boy I brought you, and a decrepit wolf. That she should disparage them so not only affronted me, it forced me to face how differently we perceived things. I suppose that if we had lived together day in and day out, such disagreements would have manifested themselves long ago. But because they were all so spaced out and such short times together, they never really got brought up.
No, and any disagreements were forgotten by the next time she came around.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we have this attitude of like, I'm the best thing that's ever happened to you, Fitz, and nothing good can happen to you unless I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's me or nothing. You are not thriving. You have the worst life imaginable. Look at how poorly you are. And I think this goes back to my feeling that we discussed last chapter where I said, I agree with the fool that she loves Fitz chivalry farcier, the name, not the person,
Mm-hmm.
because her specifically focusing on his worldly goods and possessions. Fitz likes his life. I know I was just saying, is he truly content? Are we sure about that? But like, he does, to his own knowledge, like living the way he does. He doesn't see a problem with not having guests all the time, with her just coming every once in a while. And if she stops coming, he's not gonna like be that upset about it. You know what I mean? He definitely will miss her. I don't think that's in question. They're definitely friends, but she is like ascribing so much of self-importance to herself that just isn't there.
He just lacks the feeling for at this point,
Yes. And that's fine. It just is annoying that we have her
Mm-hmm.
assuming that she's the best thing that's ever happened or will ever happen to Fitz.
Fitz describes her bringing Hap as if he were a stray kitten, and had given no thought since then as to what we might have become to one another. This quarrel was not only ending what we had shared, but exposing that we had truly shared very little at all. I felt twice devastated by it. Bitter words from a past life came back to me. The fool had warned me. She has no true affection for Fitz, only for being able to say she knew Fitz chivalry. Perhaps despite all the years we'd shared, that was still true.
Right. And I definitely don't think that's all it is. I think that's
No, I think she's also hurt.
Yes, and she's lashing out and she's trying to hurt him.
Yeah.
It's just
And succeeding.
Yeah, and succeeding and hurting me too because I'm mad. So but I think part of that too is it just comes down to, like Fitz says, it shows the difference in the way that they approach life and how they fundamentally think about things.
Mm-hmm.
Because to Starling, the grandness of life and what you can achieve for yourself is a marker of success. That like her success and able to get a younger husband and her ability to get a younger husband and this largesse that she has found herself in these years, it means something. And the fact that Fitz refuses to have any of that or take any part clearly means he's not doing well.
Right.
And that, I don't know, I think it also is really telling that she doesn't think that Hap and Fitz could have any type of deeper relationship.
Just doesn't think on it at all. I don't think she's even dwelling on what they're capable of.
Right. And I think ultimately it comes down to Starling is a very selfish character.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily mean that as a diss. I mean, it is a diss, but
yeah.
No, the way she's acting, derogatory.
Yeah.
You're selfish, derogatory. No, but I think she just fundamentally is selfish in a similar way to Malta, where like,
I guess so.
And maybe Althea even is a better thing where there's sort of that.
I can see that one more.
Inherent selfishness of like, I am the main character. I am self-important and the world revolves around my life. Anything that happens away from me isn't real. Those are NPCs.
And it's telling that we're comparing Starling to those teenage characters.
Yeah. And she's not a teenager.
And with Fitz falling silent at those last remarks, she thinks that his silence that's him wavering maybe a little bit. So she just kind of says, "Oh, Fitz, we need one another in ways neither of us likes to admit. Make breakfast. I'm going to get dressed."
I want to ask about that comment. What is a way that she needs him?
I don't know. I really don't know.
Like, I'm wondering if that's a comment to he's a tie to her greatness. Maybe she doesn't feel like her position at court is secure if she doesn't give information about Fitz to Chade. Maybe.
That's a pretty cynical way of looking at it. I kind of jumped to what you said, that her when Fitz asked, what did I make you feel? And her first couple responses were more genuine,
Mhm.
and her saying comfortable, valued, that sort of thing.
Accepted. Yeah.
Accepted. I'm guessing that Fitz is the only one who knows her past.
Okay,
I don't
yeah.
think Starling is the kind of character to be able to tell Kettrikin or anybody else. She's not close with anybody.
Right.
She is Starling the Bard of the Queen's Court.
Right.
She does tasks for them, sure, but she's not a friend of them.
Okay.
She might be a friend with Kettrikin now. She's been with her forever. They went on that journey together.
Yeah.
They saw Verity's end together. So there's some bonding there, but that's about Kettrikin.
Right.
That's not Starling bonding.
Right. And it's not necessarily a given that she would give her background, especially if she's aspiring to be this great
Right.
grand bard.
Yeah.
There's no need to
can't-
tell.
You don't have to have a tragic backstory if you already have a heroic adventure.
Exactly.
So I think Starling has a place and has someone in the world who knows her and where she came from. And that is grounding, even if you are extremely self-centered and arrogant. Having that one person is nice.
That's true. That's fair.
And then I guess she can come back and feel that self-importance of herself, brightening up this old hermit's life.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, that's fair. And she does brighten up his life. She
Yeah.
is a joy to Fitz, and he does care about her. It's just annoying that she thinks that's the only time he feels joy or gets entertainment or whatever. Whatever. So, yeah. So she says, you know what? We're just hungry. Make breakfast. I'll get dressed, and this will all feel better after we've eaten.
Now we get some real Brashnist conversation here and thoughts, because he says a fatalistic patience came over him. Starling, I think in her mind, probably knows that Fitz means it when he says no, but
Right.
also is probably like, no, he'll get over it. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
But Fitz in his mind is like, my feelings for Starling have completely changed. This is the last time I'm ever going to see her.
Yes,
Or do
he's-
this. And
He's going on the knowledge of a conversation that has not happened out loud. So,
yep, we will never see one another again, ever. And again, there's more, gossip to catch up on from Starling's side.
right,
and-
while they're eating breakfast, she's pretending like none of the morning has happened. She's giving that gossip, and the more she talks to Fitz, the further away he feels. He just feels like he doesn't know her, and her life is so far away from what he knows or cares about, and maybe it's better this way.
He's detaching himself a bit, so he thinks, as I watched her, I had the strangest sense of something forgotten, something missed. She took another piece of cheese, alternating bites of it and the bread. A sudden realization trickled through me like a drop of cold water down the spine. I interrupted her. You knew Chade was coming to see me. A fraction of a second too late, she lifted her brows in surprise. Chade? Here? These were the habits of mind I thought I had discarded, ways of thinking taught to me painstakingly by a skilled mentor in the hours between dusk and dawn during the years of my youth. It was a way of sifting facts and assembling them, a training that let the mind make swift leaps to conclusions that were not conjectures. Begin with a simple observation. Starling had not commented on the cheese. Any cheese was a luxury for the boy in me, let alone a fine, ripe cheese like this one. She should have been surprised to see it on my table, but she was not. She had said nothing of the Sandsedge brandy last night, because neither had surprised her. I was both astonished and pleased in a horrified way at how swiftly my mind leapt from point to point, until I suddenly looked down on the inevitable landscape of the facts formed. You've never offered to take Hap anywhere before this. You took the boy off to Buckkeep so that Chade could see me alone. One possible conclusion from that chilled me. In case he had to kill me, there would be no witnesses. Fitz, she rebuked me, both angry and shocked. I almost didn't hear her. So now his gears are turning.
Right. Which,
Wrong track a little bit, but gears are turning.
I do just want to quick make a statement that is probably not going to be a popular statement. I think one of the most unreliable narrative things about Fitz is his viewing of his spy abilities or assassin abilities from back in the day as an adult. And I mean that I think as the book series progresses, both in this trilogy and the final trilogy, he keeps saying, oh, I'm just a little bit rusty. Oh, I forgot a few things, but ultimately I'm still a trained assassin. I still know these things. I can still do it. And like you said, I'm not sure when, but we had talked on one of the previous episodes about how Chade later, I guess probably chapter 1, Chade later admonishes Fitz for getting lazy and not having kept his skills sharp. I want to talk about that specifically because I don't think Fitz is that perceptive or good at deception or particularly amazing at being an assassin ever again. I think he was when he was younger. Mm-hmm. I don't think he ever even gets close. And I think he thinks he does. And he still thinks, especially now in this moment, is why I want to bring it up, because he's like, oh, I'm shocked that this ability has come back to me. And yeah, sure. But also, leaps of logic aren't something specific that you necessarily need to get taught to retain, maybe?
No, but the way of looking at the world and looking for those things is probably a way of thinking that he tried to put aside. And I do agree with you that in the past, as a youth, when he was being actively trained, he was excellent at it. I think he was fantastic. And despite some fans out there, I've heard him called like a bad assassin and stuff. Yeah. Because all of his assassinations, almost all of them, happen off screen.
Yes.
But I think he was very excellent at those kinds of things. But a lot of that was while he was dating Molly.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot of it, him dating Molly and stuff, was during the Red Ship War, so he wasn't actively using some of those things. Mm-hmm. I'll agree with that. But a lot of those feelings are kind of trapped away, so I don't know if that is affected by his forging either, or if it's just skill lost in not using it in the years, or if it's brain damage from all of his beatings. Yeah. I don't know. But I agree with you. It's just he's never quite as on top of his game again.
I definitely think he's more observant than most, and probably understands things in a way that the regular person doesn't, but I don't think he's that far above a regular person. And that's really harsh for me to say. I love Fitz, and I don't think that's a flaw. I just think that it's really interesting because I don't think he knows that. And he did spend a lot of time learning it, like what, maybe 6 years? 6 to 8 years, we're going to say. And that was 15 years ago. So, yeah, 5 to 8 years is a long time, but in the grand scheme of your life.
I don't remember much algebra.
Yeah. I did high school. I did math for like 12 years of my life. I can do basic math. It's stuff like that where I'm just like, he keeps thinking like, oh, I was trained so hard as an assassin, and so like I have these things ingrained in me. And it's like, sure, some of it.
He's still really good at botany and any sort of plant lore. He's still really good at knowing, and in medicines in general. He's still really good at being able to prepare for things and journey and do all those sorts of things. It's just, I think, and observe, because his wit helps him there too. Yes. But I think it's literally just the strategic overview, leaps of logic stuff that he is better, like you said, at the normal person. But Chade is like magnitudes above him, and I think Shrewd was magnitudes above him. when he was in his prime.
Yeah. So
So yeah, I don't know.
it's just a thought that I wanted to make sure that I said now, and I'm sure I'll point out again later. But it just here, especially when he's like, oh, look at my beautiful mind and how it works, where I've made this large leap of logic and it's because of the ways I've been trained. And
I
it's
don't.
like,
He doesn't call it a big beautiful leap of
no,
logic.
I'm being facetious, but but that's the vibe I'm getting from it. And it's kind of like, well, okay, Fitz. And he probably does believe it, but I'm not convinced. And I think it's a good reminder that this is a first person Fitz point of view, and he's a flawed narrator.
Right.
He doesn't know everything.
Speaking of which,
Yeah.
he thinks that one reason would be for Chade to come and kill me.
Right. That's the only reason Fitz can think that Chade would want to be left alone.
He says
with.
one possible conclusion. There's other ones, but there's one possible conclusion that chilled me. There would be no witnesses in case he had to kill me.
Right. And Starling is rightfully angry at that.
All these years, all your visits, you've been his eyes on me, haven't you? Tell me, do you check on Byrrc and Nettle several times a year as well? She looked at me coldly, denying nothing. I had to seek them out, to give Byrrc the horses. You wanted me to do that. Yes, my mind raced on. The horses would have served as a perfect introduction. Any other gift Byrrc would have refused. But Ruddy was rightfully his, a gift from Verity. All those years ago, Starling had told him that the Queen had sent Sooty's coal as well, in token of services done for the Farseers. I looked at her, waiting for the rest. She was a minstrel. She loved to talk. All I needed to do was provide the silence. And then she kind of fills in, yeah, when I'm in that area, I visit them, and when I return to Buckkeep, Chade wants to know about him.
If he knows I was there, he'll ask.
Mm-hmm. Just as he asks after you. And the fool, do you know where his whereabouts are as well? No. She was a minstrel, and for the power of a secret, she was always in the telling of it. She had to add. But I think that Byrrc does. Once or twice, when I have visited there have been toys about, far finer than anything Byrrc could afford for Nettle. One was a doll that put me very much in mind of the fool's puppets. Another time, there was a string of wooden beads, each carved like a little face. So obviously, Starling is very observant as well and can notice that these fine woodworked pieces are probably from the fool.
Yeah. And I find that little detail to be...
Amber.
Yes, it is from Amber. It's really interesting to me to have those little details because I just need to know when Amber sent those. Was that while she was in the Rain Wilds, or was this something that was done, like, I don't know.
A string of wooden beads probably was early, when maybe before the fool went to the Rain Wilds at all.
You think the beads were before the Rain Wilds? That's what she stole in the Rain Wilds.
Yes, but one was a doll, and I feel like beads are because Starling names them as toys.
Yeah.
So I felt like the string of beads might have been a younger kid's toy, and the doll was a little bit like 3 or 4.
No, I thought the beads more like fake jewelry, which is like something that like...
Yeah, we're picturing different things.
Yeah,
then.
I'm thinking like...
Yeah.
I
think one of them was before he went to the Rain Wilds, and the other one was when they were in the Rain Wilds.
Right. Well, to me, the puppet doll thing would be before, because that's what Fool made, and then beads were what Amber made. So that's why I thought it that way.
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe not.
So while that was interesting, Fitz keeps his face straight and then asks directly the question that came to mind. Why would Chade consider me a threat to the Farseers? It is the only reason I know that might make him think he must kill me. Something akin to pity came into her face. You truly believe that, don't you? That Chade would kill you? That Chade could kill you? That I would help by luring the boy away? I know Chade. And he knows you. He once told me that you were incapable of completely trusting anyone, that wanting to trust and fearing to would always divide your soul. No, I think the old man simply wanted to see you alone so he could speak freely to you, to have you to himself and to see for himself how you were doing after all your years of silence. She had a minstrel's way with words and tone. She made it seem as if my avoiding Buckkeep had both been rude and cruel to my friends. The truth was that it had been a matter of survival.
I think that's a little bit of Fitz trying to save face in his own mind of like,
I don't need to address any of your accusations.
Yeah, you're just twisting things. It's not rude to my friends to do this. I had to, or else I wouldn't have lived. And like, sure, you had to stay away. You didn't have to ignore every person that loved you forever. And I think it is pretty telling that Chade says Fitz will never be able to trust anybody fully.
Yeah.
That he just can't, the way he was raised and everything that happened to him, which is a little bit of Chade's fault. Let's be real.
Right.
It's
yeah.
kind of his fault. But
wanting to trust and fearing to trust would always divide his soul.
Yeah. And I think that's
pretty accurate.
True. Yeah.
Chade knows his boy.
Yeah. Sadly.
What did Chade talk with you about? She asked, too casually. I think you know, I replied, wondering if she did. Her expression changed and I could see her mind working. So, Chade hadn't entrusted the truth of his mission to her. However, she was bright and quick and had many of the pieces. So this is something that is very smart of Fitz, right? Like, he is good socially still. And he is able to... This is something that Starling wants to know, right? So she wants to lean into it. She wants to get more information from Fitz. But also, he's playing his part to get her to tell him more information.
Right. Okay, this is going to be mean. This feels like the Harry Potter trope of like, he only knows Expecto Patronum, but he's really good at it. So it's all he really needs. And like...
staying quiet.
Yeah, Fitz just needs to stay quiet. And it's this training that he has as an assassin. He's just so good at staying quiet and letting people trip over their own tongue. That's all the only trick he needs.
I find it really funny and cute because that's Chade's thing.
Yeah, it is. No, for sure.
So I don't find it like, I don't know, shoehorned in all the time. It happens quite often over the past 2 chapters, but that's because he does it for Hap, and then he does it twice with Starling here, right?
And to be fair, it was brought up because Chade did it first.
Yes.
And it reminded him that that's a tool he could use. So yes, but it brings to mind that for me, that this is like the little... I only need one spell, and it works 100% of the time. And I don't know. And I don't think that's necessarily... I'm making it sound bad. I'm sorry. It is not bad. That's just how it comes across to me, and I'm okay with that. I'm allowing that to be the believability, my like expectations. Right. Yeah. Sure. Okay, that's how it works here.
He stays quiet, and she spills the beans of what she think Chade might talk to him about.
And it's not what Fitz was expecting.
No. Old Blood, the piebald threats. There have been many times in my life where I've been shocked and had to conceal it, but this time, he thinks, might have been the hardest. It is a trouble that has been brewing for a time and looks to be coming to a boil now. At Springfest, on the night of the minstrels, where all vie to perform for their monarch, one minstrel sang the old song about the piebald prince. You recall it? I did. It told of a princess carried off by a witted one in the form of a piebald stallion. Once they were alone, he took his man's shape and seduced her. She gave birth to a bastard son, modeled dark and light just as his sire had been. By treachery and spite, her bastard came to the throne to rule cruelly with the aid of his witted cohorts. The entire kingdom had suffered until, so the song said, his cousin of pure farseer blood had rallied 6 nobles' sons to his cause. At the summer solstice, when the sun stood at noon and the piebald prince's powers were weakest, they fell upon him and slew him. They hanged him, then chopped his body to pieces, and then burned the pieces over water, to wash his spirit far away, lest it find a home in some beast's body. The song's method of dealing with the piebald prince had become the traditional way to be surely rid of witted ones. Not my favorite song, I said quietly. And then Starling continues on, saying, yeah, understandably, Sleck sang it well, to much applause, more than his voice truly merits. Feelings...
And then she goes on to, start dissing his technique, and...
He has that quaver at the end of his notes that some find endearing.
This is like Starling. Yeah. And she's like, all right, fine.
Feelings run high against the witted these days. The witted ones have been restless of late, and one hears wild tales. I have heard that in one village where a witted man was hanged and burned, all the sheep died 4 days later, just dropped in the fields. Folks said it was his family's revenge, but when they went for vengeance against his kin, they found them long gone. There was a scroll left tacked to the door of their house. All it said was, "You deserved it." There have been other incidences as well. I met her eyes. So Hap told me. So she continues on with the Buckkeep story, saying, well, after Slack sang, there was another minstrel that came forward, and he was very young. Perhaps that's why he was so foolish. He sang a song about Fitz chivalry farseer, and he said that he had first heard it in the hamlet of witted folk. It touched on all that chivalry's bastard had done before his witted taint was revealed. He even stole a phrase or two from my song Antler Island Tower, if you can believe the gall of that. Then, this song went on that this farseer's son with old blood blessed, of royal blood and wild the best, had not died in the pretender's dungeon. According to this song, the bastard had lived and been true to his father's family. The minstrel sang that when King Verity went off to seek the Elderlings, the bastard rose from his grave to rally to his rightful king's aid. The minstrel sang a stirring scene of how the bastard called Verity back through the gates of death to show him a garden of stone dragons that could be wakened to the Six Duchies' cause. That at least had the ring of truth to it. It made me sit up and wonder even if his voice was growing hoarse by then. She shrugged, then observed caustically, "If you wanted a song made of those days, you might have thought of me first. I was there, you know. In fact, it was why I was there. And I am a far better minstrel than that boy was." There was a quiver of jealous outrage in her voice. Fitz, of course, denies it, like I had nothing to do with that.
He's like, I have no idea who this person is. I did not ask anybody to do this. Why would I have? But I do find it a little bit funny that Starling's first reaction was, he knows something that definitely happened. Why would you ask somebody else besides me to sing?
Mm-hmm. That's why I was there. Yeah. That's the whole reason why I tagged along. And then I was forced to not sing that song.
So, hello.
And Starling goes on saying, well, you've little enough to worry about having, Fitz wishing no one had heard it.
Yes.
You have little to worry about there. I'd never heard it before that day, nor since. It was not well made. The tune did not fit the theme. The words were ragged. The Starling. Oh, very well. She says that he gave it the heroic ending and that if the farseer crown demanded it, the true-hearted witted bastard would return to aid the kingdom. At the end of the song, some of the Springfest crowd yelled insults at him, and someone said he was likely witted himself and fit for burning. Queen Kettrican commanded them to silence, but at the end gave him no purse as she did the other minstrels. And then pauses for dramatic effect.
Yes. I do want to quick point out something that we kind of skimmed over that I think is an important detail is that this kid that's singing the song did step forward at the beginning and say they were from a witted village. And they got the story from a witted village.
Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah, when he said it, he had first heard it in a hamlet of witted folk.
Yes.
But that is a lie.
Yes. Which we will now know because as Starling waits for dramatic effect and Fitz kind of just stares at her like, okay.
She's like, oh, he didn't get a purse because he had vanished before Kettrican could give them out.
Yes, like, why aren't you more outraged?
She called his name first, but no one knew where he was. His name was unfamiliar to me, Tag's son. Son of Tag, grandson of Reaver, I could have told her. And both Reaver and Tag had been very able members of Verity's Buckkeep Guard. My mind reached back through the years to find Tag's face as he knelt before Verity in the stone garden before the gates of death. Yes, so I supposed it had looked to him. Verity stepped out from the stark black skill pillar and into the uncertain circle of the firelight. Tag had recognized his king, despite all hardship had done to Verity. He had proclaimed his loyalty to him, and Verity had sent him on his way, bidding him return to Buckkeep and tell all there that the rightful king would return. In thinking back on it, I was almost certain that Verity had arrived at Buckkeep before the soldier did. Dragons a-wing are a deal faster than a man on foot. I had not known Tag had recognized me as well. Who could have foreseen he would pass on that tale, let alone that he would have a minstrel for a son? So there you go. That's how we know that Tag's son did not first hear it in a witted hamlet,
Yes.
because his father would have told him the story.
Right. And it's really interesting to me that in this time of clear turmoil against witted, that this boy would say anything positive about a witted person unless he was witted himself.
I
to me.
don't think so. See, I think this is a minstrel looking for renown, and this is the perfect time to reveal your song,
Your lore.
pro witted wit person song when the piebald princess sang. Then you step up saying, "Oh, this is from a witted hamlet," and then you sing about the farseer bastard.
He's just really bad at reading the room, and
Well, it creates more drama, right? People will talk about that.
Yeah, okay. You're right.
So I think he chose that for the spectacle.
Okay.
Maybe headcanon Tag was witted, and he lives in a witted hamlet, and his son, Tag's son, is also of the old blood. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean,
And
it doesn't even...
maybe he did first hear it in witted hamlet because he lived there. He grew up there.
Yeah. Or, maybe just Tag's son is a witted person. I don't know. It's not impossible that somebody else would be. And maybe he's just really loyal to Fitz because his dad was all like, it's the only reason my king was able to do what he did was because of Fitz. I don't know. Who knows? But,
I mean, it must be pretty incredible to have your king go off and be vanished for almost a year or something.
Yeah, he was gone for a long time.
And no one's seen him. No one knows where he is. The queen goes after him on an adventure and being like, okay, it's civil war basically now. We have Regal stepping up and moving the capital, and the queen is missing.
Right. Well, we also know that Kettricken did sort of have to go on the journey because she was fleeing.
Right. Yeah. So now the queen in waiting, Queen Kettricken in waiting, is at war with Prince Regal, or King Regal now, of the Six Duchies. No one has heard of King Verity forever. And your father is one of the guards who sees him in the flesh.
Yeah.
Right before the whole of the Six Duchies is cleared. The cleansing of Buck happens, is cleared of the red ship raiders. And your father comes back and I saw the king and he told me to do this.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. That's fun.
You'd make a song out of that too. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So I don't know. So it's really interesting that we have this. And Fitz, sort of puts together who he is. And Starling can tell that he recognizes the name and is kind of mad of so you do know him. And Fitz rolls his eyes and sort of goes, I don't know Tag's son. And
my
he's
mind
not
wandered,
Yeah, I was thinking about other things. I don't know who that is. And he's not lying to her. He doesn't know Tag's son, but he does know who Tag's son is. Tricksy with the words.
Then he continues on saying, the witted have grown restless. Why? I thought you would have known better than I. I lead a solitary life, Starling, as well you know. I'm in a poor position to hear tidings of any kind save what you bring me, and this was information you never shared with me. She looked away from me and I wondered, had she decided to keep it from me? Had Shade bade her not speak of it to me? Or had it been crowded from her mind by her stories of nobles she had played for and acclaim she had received? It isn't a pretty tale. I suppose it began 1.5 years ago, perhaps 2. So she relates to Fitz that pretty much any time that witted people are brought up, it's basically how they are found out, punished, and killed. And that's how it started.
Right.
There's a lot more rising sentiment against them.
Yeah. And it's obviously not something you're going to tell your friend who would be in position of maybe having that happen to them. Because it's not nice news. And then when it snowballs into something else, it's already been so long. You haven't caught him up on the fact that it's been talked about. Of course you're not going to. But I think it does also come back to this sort of dynamic in the relationship between Fitz and Starling, where Starling sort of decides what Fitz gets to know and sort of chooses that based off of the whim, and it's much like the berry on the side of the road. It's not pre-planned. It's not like she was maliciously keeping this from him.
She just directs the conversation to what she wants to talk about.
Yeah, and she doesn't talk about bad stories that are ugly. And, I don't know. I think it's just an interesting factoid.
So she continues on saying that the Red Ship War had everyone's fill of bloodlust for a long time, but maybe Regal's King's Circle and Justice by Combat awakened blood sport as a common thing in the Six Duchies, because that is becoming more common now, that kind of village justice. The old hatred of witted folk flared up again, now that the Red Ship War has passed and they need some sort of entertainment, is her thought. The queen spoke out against it for your sake, I imagine. She is a beloved queen, and she has wrought many changes during her rule, but in this, tradition runs too deep. The folk in the mountain think, well, what can she know of our ways, mountain-bred as she is? So although Queen Kettrican did not countenance it, the hounding of the witted went on as it always has. Then, in Trenery in Faro, about 1.5 years ago, there was a horrifying incident. As the story came to Buckkeep, a witted girl had a fox as her beast, and she carried it where it hunted so long as the blood ran every night. She cared not where it hunted, so long as the blood ran every night. A pet fox? I interrupted her. Not exactly common. It was even more suspect that the girl who had this fox was neither of noble blood nor wealthy. What business had a farmer's child with such a beast? So the rumors spread, and then all of a sudden is that something got into Lord Doplin's aviary and made dinner of his songbirds and imported Rainwild's fowl. He sent his huntsmen after the girl and fox said to be at the root of it, and they were run down, not gently, and brought before Lord Doplin. She swore it was none of her fox's doing, she swore she was not witted, but when the hot irons were put to the fox, it was said that she screamed as loudly as the beast did. Then, to close the circle of his proof, Doplin had the nails drawn from the girl's fingers and toes, and the fox likewise shrieked with her. A moment. Her words dizzied me. I could imagine it too well. So Starling says, I shall finish it swiftly then. Mm-hmm. They both died slowly, but the next night more of the songbirds were slain, and an old huntsman said it was a weasel, not a fox. So Starling thinks that it was the injustice of her death as much as the cruelty of it that roused the witted against him. The next day, Doplin's own dog snapped at him, and Doplin had his dog and the dog boy put down. And then he claimed when he walked through his stables, every one of his horses went wild-eyed at his passage, laying back ears and kicking their stall walls. So he had 2 stable boys hanged over water and burned. And then he claimed flies began to flock to his kitchen so that he found them dead daily in his food. And that, I shook my head at her, that is the wildness of a man's uneasy conscience, not the work of any witted ones I have ever known. In any case, the folk cried out for the queen for justice when over 12 of his lesser servants had been tortured or killed, and she sent Chade.
Right. And I think this is the really important aspect, that we have a non-witted person telling the story of what has happened to a witted person. So we get both sides. We get sort of that outrage of, or maybe not outrage, but just sort of the like shock of like, oh wow, like they were really trying to get back at him. And then Fitz's revelation of, no, that's not any wit. Wit cannot do that. This is a dude who clearly feels bad for what he's done. And he is obviously not a very good person because he's like killing people left and right.
Right.
And obviously did not learn his lesson from the first person he unjustly killed. Mm-hmm. So it probably did make him feel more and more guilty.
He had just recently read the book of afflictions and diseases or whatever by the epigraph guy.
Yeah. Or that just really goes to show you how deep the sentiment runs of, this is just an evil that needs to be rooted out, and you can't feel bad for killing someone with this disease. You don't want it to spread. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so interesting. And it is also really interesting that the people came to Buckkeep and asked for Queen's justice. It got to the point where,
I mean, over 12 servants were tortured or killed.
But it really does make me feel horrible for that girl, the first girl, that nobody wanted Queen's justice for her. Mm-hmm. It's just after way more people are killed that they're like, all right, fine, somebody do something.
So Chade made a simple solution of it all. By Queen's order, he forbade Doplin to keep any animals in his manor, and he cannot ride, hawk, or hunt in any form. He even forbade him and all who live in his keep the eating of any flesh or fish for a year. That will make a dreary holding. It is said amongst the minstrels that no one guests with Doplin any more unless they must, that his servants are few and surly, and that he has lost his stature with the other nobles since his hospitality has become such a threadbare welcome, and Chade forced him to pay blood gold, not only to the families of the slain servants, but to the family of the fox girl. Did they take it? The servants' families did. It was only fair. The fox girl's family was gone, dead, or fled. No one could or would say, but Chade demanded that it be kept by the queen in case someone did step forward for it. That should have settled it, but from that time to now, the incidents have multiplied, not just from the scourings for witted ones, but the revenge the witted wreak in turn on their tormentors. I don't see why any of that would provoke further uprisings among the witted. It seems to me Doplin was justly punished. And some say more severely than he deserved. But Chade was unrelenting, nor did he stop with that. Shortly after that, all 6 dukes received scrolls from Queen Kettrican saying that to be witted was no crime, save that a witted one used it for evil ends. She told the dukes they must forbid their nobles and lords to execute witted ones, save that their crimes had been proven against them as surely as any ordinary man's crimes. The edict did not sit well, as you can imagine. Where it is not ignored, proof of a man's guilt is always ample after his death. Instead of calming feelings, the Queen's declaration seemed to wake all the old feelings against the witted ones.
This is such an interesting turn of events to me, and almost reeks of some sort of hand stirring the pot. Like
It is, remember? It's Illustor's hands.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. That's what I mean, is that really looking at this story, it's like, there's no way thing after thing going wrong that this is just a natural turn of event. I mean,
right.
Okay, I say that in today's world where a lot of things kind of feel that way. Yes, people can be crazy and stirred up to a rage. However, in this instance with this story, especially because we were with Fitz 15 years ago, and yeah, people didn't like Witted, and when they found out he was Witted, it was like scandalous. It still wasn't that big of a deal. It wasn't something that was touched on really at all by Fitz, and it could just be that he was too young to know and too sheltered. In a way, it feels funny to call Fitz sheltered, but maybe he was too sheltered to know what was happening in the outer duchies to people. But it is really interesting that it's picking up now, and that no matter what Kettrican does, she can't catch a break. None of it's the right decision.
Right, I know. So Starling continues on saying that among the witted, it has seemed to rally them to defiance. They do not suffer their blood to be executed without a fight. Sometimes they are content merely to free their own before they can be killed, but often enough they strike back in vengeance. Almost any time there is an execution of a witted one, some evil swiftly befalls those responsible. Their cattle die, or diseased rats bite their children. Always it has to do with animals. In one village, the river fish they depend on simply did not migrate that year. Their nets hung empty and folk went hungry. Ridiculous. Folk claim happenstance as malice. The witted do not have the kind of powers you are ascribing to them. I spoke with great surety. She gave me a disdainful look. Then why do the piebalds claim credit for such acts if the work is not theirs? So then she explains who the piebalds are, that no one actually knows. They just leave messages saying that, yeah, you deserved it, blah, blah, blah. And they're all marked with the same mark, that black and white stallion, an image of a piebald stallion. Such a one was killed unjustly for no crime but merely possessing the old blood magic. Now our wrath falls on you. When the piebald prince returns, he will have no mercy on you. It is signed with no name, but just the image. So that's pretty much all the notes are kind of like that.
Yeah. Where it's just sort of, you deserved it.
Mm-hmm.
Ha ha.
Yeah.
And it makes everybody really mad. And what's making them more mad is that Queen Kettricken is refusing to send her guards after them.
Yeah, so now the gossip among the nobility is that Queen Kettricken herself is at fault for the increased executions of witted ones, for her punishing of Lord Doplin has made them think that they have the right to their preferred magic. At my scowl, she reminded me, a minstrel just repeats what she has heard.
Right. It's not my words. Don't shoot the messenger.
Yep.
And I mean, rightfully, Fitz should feel upset because it is ridiculous to think that all these people think that the magic is bad. I think there are bad aspects to the wit if it's not taught properly and
Yeah.
like people don't understand what to do, like with Fitz where he bonded too young multiple times over and over again. But again, it came from a society where that had to be that part of him had to be hidden and he wasn't allowed to talk about it and it was seen as wrong. And so there was no safe way to learn how to use the wit and know right from wrong because it was a sturdy secret thing he couldn't talk about. And so I think that really gets to the heart of the problem of, yeah, there are dangers to the wit, but if the wit was allowed to be more widely used, there'd be significantly less danger.
Yeah. She walks over, sets her hands on his shoulders, and gently adds, after all the years that we've been together, surely you know by now that I do not consider you tainted. She kissed my cheek. Nearly I took her in my arms. Instead, I stood awkwardly, for she was right behind my chair. When she tried to embrace me, I chilled my heart, set her at arm's length from me. You are not mine, I told her quietly. Nor am I his, she blazed at me suddenly. I belong to myself, and I shall decide who shares my body. It hurts nothing for me to be with both of you. I will not get pregnant by either of you. If any man who could get me with child, it would have happened long ago. So what does it matter whose bed I share? Then he echoes back, I too belong to myself, and I decide who will share my body, and I will not share it with another man's wife.
I think great comeback from Fitz, first of all.
Yeah, he says, I'm not as witty as her, so I just echoed her words.
Yeah, but it really ruffles my feathers that she tries to turn this into it's my body and I get to do what I want with it. You don't get to tell me what to do, and I'm deciding to sleep with you. I'm not property. That's not the conversation being had here.
Right. Yeah,
and
that's true, Starling.
Yeah, you do get to make your own choices.
But there are two choices in
this. Consent is a two-way street, kids. And Starling clearly doesn't get that because she's like, who cares? I want it. And Fitz is like, okay, well, I don't anymore. So what now? Because you're right. You have that choice. I'm also making a choice. And I think that is also part of the frustrating disagreement that they're having at the whole outside of this whole witted talk is that Starling once again is viewing this in such a self-centered way about
right.
I want this. I want this. All that matters is that I want to do this. You can't take it away from me. And Fitz is like, I'm not taking anything away from you. You're allowed to want to do whatever you want. And so am I. And I don't want this. And I think that sort of he's setting a boundary and she's like, well, I don't care about your boundary, so you shouldn't either. That really drives me nuts.
Fitz says that he thinks she finally believes it because she kneels down by her pack and starts stuffing it furiously. Says, I don't know why I ever bothered with you. Mishap, true to his name, chose that moment to enter the cabin. The wolf was at his heels. Should I leave? He asked baldly. No, Starling spat the word. You get to stay. I'm the one he's throwing out. Thanks to you. You might ponder a moment or two, Hap, on what would have become of you if I had left you digging in that village garbage heap. I deserved gratitude from you, not this betrayal. The boy's eyes went wide. Nothing she had ever done, not even how she had deceived me, angered me as much as witnessing her hurt him. He gave me a stricken look as if he expected I too would turn on him. Then he bolted out of the door. Night Eyes gave me a baleful look, then spun to follow him. I'll come soon. Let me finish this first. Better you had never started it. I let his rebuke hang unanswered, for there was no good reply to it. Starling glared up at me, and as I glowered back, I saw something almost like fear pass over her face. Best you were gone, I said tightly.
Why does everybody think Fitz is gonna beat up Starling? Like,
Well, I think only Starling thinks that.
so did Hap last chapter. He was like, well,
yeah,
I was
but
scared you might hurt her. And he was like,
that was put into his head by Starling.
Yeah, that's true. But still, like, come on. Fitz would never.
She's seen him at his angry and fighting.
Yeah, but like, not to a friend.
Right.
Like, not, I don't know. I mean, I
Yeah.
guess he did to Burek, but like, that was.
Remember, she's also, she doesn't think he's tainted, right? But she's
Right.
uncomfortable with Wit still.
Yeah.
So that like wild beast man might still be kind of in the back of her mind, kind of
That's
influencing. This guy could go crazy at any moment. He's chivalry's bastard, Fitz chivalry farseer. He's a wild man who
Yeah.
rose from the dead
And was
with
a
his
beast.
wit magic.
Yeah. And was a beast on the battlefield. And yeah.
So I
don't
think
know.
like her obsession with his name also influences how she sees him.
Right. And I don't know. It's just frustrating because we know Fitz as a person would never do that. But it's hard because as a woman, I have been in scary situations with men where it's like you don't know what's going to happen. But also not from just me being angry at somebody that I'm friends with that I've known for a really long time, and then they're mad at me, and so then I immediately start assuming something bad is going to happen. But, you know, maybe that speaks to some unhealed trauma on Starling's part, because she did go through a lot, and
Yeah.
they don't have therapists here, so
True.
she has not ever addressed it, I'm sure. So maybe that's part of it too. It just is like one of those things where we love Fitz, and I think that also makes it frustrating to see her react that way.
Mm-hmm.
But she does, and he, you know, to his credit, he doesn't yell at her more or like, you know, get angry. He doesn't yell at all, period. But he just sort of goes, I think you should leave.
Yeah.
So
And the wary look in her eye was as great as an insult to me as the abuse she had flung at Hap. So he leaves and fetches her horse and saddles it, gets it ready, calms himself and the horse down because the horse can sense his agitation.
right. I also just want a quick back up to the abuse she flung at Hap. What is that about?
Right,
I'm getting
I know.
thrown out. You get to stay, and it's not fair. What are you, 12?
I know. It's that alone. Like I can understand and get the character and feel some sympathy for things that she went through, but how she just verbally abuses this boy who is confused and hurt himself
Also, like,
is insane and puts blame on him for her being unfaithful to her husband.
right. And also, like, it's not his fault that you did that in front of him.
Yeah. It's also not his fault that he was an orphan. It's not his fault that you decided to
Yes.
bring him with you to Fitz's.
And to turn around and be like, you should be more grateful. First of all, it's done. You can't undo it. So think about that, Starling. Second of all, why would she treat somebody that way? I just, like, her immaturity astounds me constantly. But I think this especially, like,
Yeah.
I'm already mad at the way she's reacting to Fitz being like, hey, I don't want to sleep with somebody who has a husband. Rightfully so, in my opinion. And she's like, taking it to a personal level, which probably stems from guilt that she's feeling for deceiving people, but also then to turn around and lash out at a 14-year-old kid, 15-year-old kid at 35 or more years old. Grow up.
Yeah. See, I like in the first trilogy, the last book, Assassin's Quest, I was probably more on Starling's side than most people, most readers. And I'm not never like on her side, but I'm more of a fan of her
Yeah.
than a lot of other people. But this book, like, I just can't defend any of that. That's
No.
it's so awful.
And it, like, sure.
It makes sense. It's just awful.
Yeah, and I mean, sure, like, you can be upset and not handle things well, but like, I think I just keep thinking in my mind to be a grown adult and not be able to separate a child from the situation and like to just let your temper run wild even in front of a child is crazy to me, and I hate it. And I just, hate to see it. I hate that Hap had to hear it. And also, I kind of hate that Fitz doesn't immediately address it and lets it go. I mean, in his mind, he's upset, right? And we know that. He doesn't say anything out loud to her to be like, hey, that was kind of messed up. Maybe you should think about that. He just lets it go. He just lets her say whatever she wants to say and keep digging and digging and digging. And he'll just deal with Hap later.
Yep.
It just, so I don't like any part of this. I don't like her reaction. I don't like Fitz's either.
So as he gets the horses ready, she comes out and says, "Can't wait for me to leave, can you?" That's not true, and you know it. I tried to keep my voice level and calm. The pain I had been denying broke through my humiliation at how gullible I had been, and my anger that she had so used me. Our bond had not been a tender, heartfelt love. Rather, it had been a companionship that had included the sharing of our bodies and the trust of sleeping in one another's arms. The betrayal of a friend differs from the treachery of a lover only in the degree of pain, not the kind. I suddenly knew I had just lied to her. I desperately wanted her to leave. Her presence was like an arrow standing in a wound. Could not be healed until she was gone. Nevertheless, I tried to think of some significant words, something that would salvage the good part of what we had shared, but nothing came to me. She shook her head at me. You could have been someone. Regardless of how you were born, they gave you every chance of making something of yourself. You could have mattered. But this is what you chose. Remember that. You chose this.
You just know she thinks she did something there.
Right.
She's like, you could have been somebody, but you're not.
Remember how she judges success of how you were talking before versus what Fitz has done, right? He threw away his success. He could have been successful. He could have done something with his life, but to retire in obscurity and with no one to sing his song or sing about him.
Like he chose that, and that's negative. I think also, obviously, Starling knows more about Fitz's life than most people. Honestly, probably more than Molly does at this point in time.
Oh, 100%.
But she doesn't know everything. And she doesn't understand what Fitz actually lived through. Like, it's just a story. It's not a human being who had to live through being the bastard child of an abdicated king. Mm-hmm. Like, there's not a lot of room for success in that. Like, they gave you every chance despite your birth. First of all, despite his birth, he didn't choose that. Second of all, what chances was he given? Every time he was good at something, he had to stop doing it because it was too much, whatever. Like, he wanted to be a scroll dude. Scribe, thank you.
Scroll he was
dude.
A good scroll dude.
He was a good scroll dude. He wanted to be a scribe, and they said no because that was too much freedom, and he could do something that would be bad for the Farseer name. He wanted to be a trained skill user, and they said no because Galen hated him.
Well, they said yes, but Galen hated him, and Galen said
ruined
no.
it. Yeah, they didn't protect him in that. Like,
a lot of those things were not his fault. He made the choices to do those things.
But that's what I'm saying is, like, what opportunities did he miss out on? The one time he had opportunity to rise above his station to become the next king and take over his cousin or his uncle's throne, he failed pretty miserably at that. So, like, he took opportunities.
He ran through the halls and murdered a skill user in front of the whole Great Hall.
Yeah.
And then got arrested and tortured.
Yeah. So like,
didn't go so well for the one day of saying, yeah, I'll do this.
Yeah. So not like the best. And also, it's not like he did nothing and sat and twiddled his thumbs and was like, no, thank you. I don't want to become anything. He tried over and over again to become something and couldn't. And so I think that's why this remark really hits the mark, or misses the mark rather, because Fitz doesn't care about that. Yeah, he did choose this and he's happy with it.
Yeah, he's like, I chose this. Is great.
Yeah, good point. I did choose this. Thank you. That makes me feel better. Like,
and she rides away and trots away. And despite, the pain at her leaving, he does not regret the ending because it doesn't really feel like an ending, but the foreboding of a beginning. A shiver ran over me as if the fool himself stood at my elbow and whispered words at my ear. Do not you sense it? A crossroads, a vertex, a vortex. All paths change from here. There it is.
Yeah.
And there was an oncoming squall, and he told himself he took no satisfaction that Starling would begin her journey drenched.
Yes, but he's definitely lying to himself. It is satisfying that she's going to be drenched for her journey. But that's that sort of moment there where he feels like he can almost feel the Fool at his arm. He does look around and Fool isn't there. Do you think this is, in a weird way, the skill connection of the fingerprints that's happening here? Or is this just sort of another...
I think it's just a narrative thing.
So this is just a narrative device, not
Yeah,
real.
I think so. It's more of, Chade's memories brought forward these thoughts, and now he's thinking about his past, and the Fool is there always. And he brought up the previous Fool quote about Starling earlier in the chapter, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's fair.
As we end this chapter, I noticed the next one is named Hedge Witch. And you're like, is Jinnah in this book? And it's in chapter 4, believe it or not.
Yeah, okay, touche. Yeah, I feel like this is not the part of Jinnah that I'm thinking of. Like, I'm imagining when he goes back to Buckkeep and they're like sleeping together vibes, where I'm like, is that this book? Still not convinced it is this book. It could be, absolutely. But I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we'll get there. We will get there, and we'll meet Jinnah next chapter.
True.
If you have any thoughts, please let us know. It is fitzhappy@gmail.com, or visit us on our website, isfitzhappy.com, and go to any of our social media links that you can find on there: Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, YouTube, and Reddit. We're at isfitzhappy at all of them.
Yeah, and especially would love to hear if anybody has better insight into Starling's behavior, because Luke and I, as we've said multiple times, are not professionals.
We wanna know other people's thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, we would
what
love
you see
to know.
in the character.
Yeah, well, how are you reading it? What are you getting out of this? Is it something different? Is it something that you think we're missing? I would love to know. But no, this chapter definitely is one that I was just getting more and more mad. And then there's that sort of lull with what's happening with the wit, and my anger turns to like, oh my gosh, I forgot this is happening. What's going to happen to Fitz? What's going on next? And then back to like, she gets worse. She's worse.
So exactly what's written in the book. It's good.
Yeah, it is really, really
Hobb
good.
did a good job.
It is really well written, as angry as I am. But yeah, so thanks for joining us this time, and we look forward to hearing from you next week.